Axios senior politics reporter Eugene Scott, Democratic pollster Cornell Belcher, and former Virginia Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. Thanks to all of you for being here. Appreciate it. Eugene, let me start with you. This is a moment where you have 4 indictments against the former president, a sweeping indictment that we got overnight. What do you make of this moment, and what are the political implications for the primary and the general? I mean, it seems like the primary is pretty immovable at this point.
Well, I'm sure it's been said a million times at this point, but it's historical, and that's not an exaggeration. We never thought we would be in this moment. One could argue there were some candidates who said that we would eventually find ourselves here in 2016, but many people who backed Donald Trump didn't think it would get to this point, and to think that it could even go on and get worse from where we even are right now is of significant concern to people regardless of their political persuasion.
Barbara, pick up on that point. I mean, what are you anticipating as you watch this all unfold? We've talked about the fact that the debate is in 8 days. It wouldn't be a surprise if former President Trump tried to counter-program that in some way if he doesn't appear. But could one of the candidates gain some last-minute traction in the debate? What do you think?
Well, I think it's important to realize Trump lost in Georgia. Georgia used to be a red state. There are very popular Republicans in Georgia that won. Governor Kemp, who made a very strong statement against Trump today, who said this was a fair election. Trump is wrong when he said he won. Lieutenant Governor Duncan, who testified, as did Governor Kemp, and Brad Raffensperger. These are all people who Trump attacked, who, you know, in Kemp and Raffensperger won large last year. And they are going to be people who are going to testify against Donald Trump. So Trump has been losing in Georgia. He will lose again in 24, even if he wins a primary. So Republicans need to wake up. They are going to lose again in Georgia if Trump is the nominee. So primary voters are in a bubble where even if they're going to support Trump, he is going to lose in this red state if they pick Trump. So I think there is an opportunity, Chris Christie, who is gaining,
ground.
He's gaining ground because he, as a prosecutor, is pointing out this guy's been a loser for 7 years in the general election. So there's a real divide here between general elections. And if we pick somebody, a 4 times indicted, 2 times impeached, 7-year loser, Donald Trump, Republicans are going to lose again. And that's what Governor Kemp in Georgia is trying to warn Republicans.
Let me read what he said, because Barbara raises an important point. This is what Brian Kemp said today. He said, the 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen. The future of our country is at stake in 2024, and that must be our focus.
You know, I pick up on the excellent points that the Congresswoman was making. And to that point, Kemp was someone who actually could compete in the middle of the electorate, right? And so these battleground states, you actually have to be able to compete in the middle of the electorate. And what he said is spot on. And I'm going to push back on the immovable point that you made early on, because
you think the primary is
hold on,
okay?
Because I worked for a guy who was 40 points behind in national polls too. You might remember his name was Barack Obama. However, to the Congresswoman's point, you do have to hit the person in front of you. You're never going to, you know this from campaign trail.
Which Chris Christie is doing.
You're never going to get in front of the person in front of you unless you actually hit them. And you do have to find contrast. And watching that very excellent report by Allie, as always, Allie, great. The inability for any of them to actually hit this guy and take advantage of this moment says to me they're not serious candidates. They're not serious candidates for president.
Let me stay with that point because it's a fascinating one. Former President Obama did come from behind. He also won Iowa. Eugene, I mean, how make or break is Iowa? Donald Trump has a lead in Iowa. It's actually, according to the latest polls, not as big as his lead nationally. So but it's still a double-digit lead, though.
Yeah, and, he was expected to do well in Iowa. It's a state that has supported him in the past, and so it's not a surprise that people are still on the Trump train there. What is concerning, though, to Cornell's point, is that there could be people getting off the Trump train if his opponents would point out that what he has done is disqualifying. But you can't do that when you are trying to get people who love Trump to love you as well. Trump still is leading in the GOP, And that's what we're seeing happen.
Barbara, Cornell is challenging the immovable argument. What do you think? Does he have a point?
Well, Republicans who are donating to Trump right now are donating to basically a legal defense fund. And next week, he is going to be probably not showing up to the debate. And you're going to have probably just one person, Chris Christie, pointing out those things. And actually, Chris Christie, who just went to Ukraine and was actually arguing on issues and making a case for, principled Republican policies, is going to be there pointing out, he's going to be taking on the man. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to take on the man, you're not going to be the man or the woman. And the candidates who aren't going to do that aren't going to be the man or the woman. So I think, if Trump isn't going to show up, it's really an insult to the voters. And instead, he is going to have, Trump is going to be having to show up in court every day. Mm-hmm. And how can you have a candidate who's going to have to sit, in front of a jury every day, and he's going to be using all the money you're sending to him to pay for a legal defense instead of a candidacy?
Can I build
on
that point?
Please.
Because here's the larger problem for, I think, the
And
Republicans.
he's going to have his co-defendants turning on him soon.
Right. Yes.
But
here's the larger
potentially.
Here's a larger problem that again Scott showed is that it's a media blackout, right? Can any of us really tell the American people know what the Republicans who barely won Congress this last time around, what have they been working on? What have they been doing? We have no idea. What is Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate working on? We have no idea. It's all about Trump all the time, and that hurts not only the top of the ticket, but down
And you need
ballot.
a candidate who's talking about the future. And if you're not talking about the future, you're going to be losing. And that's the problem with Trump. He's all about the past and himself, not about the American people in the future.
I want to play a fascinating piece of video, which is a focus group of voters. This is what they're talking about when they were asked about these indictments. Let's look.
Who could tell me what this latest indictment is related to? In other words, what event? Who could tell me what this is related to? Without blurting it out. 5 of you. Okay. Shantae, what is it about?
I'm torn on the Georgia or the documents.
Okay.
It's one of those two.
I thought it was about the whole Stormy Daniels scandal.
Eugene, this was an Axios focus group. What does it say that these voters don't really know where we are with all of these indictments? And it's not to place any blame on anyone. There are a lot of indictments. It gets confusing.
And that's what one of the gentlemen actually said. There were 2 of these, and when they were asked, what is this one about? To be fair, this was after the 3rd indictment and before this one. But even then, they said, there are just so many, and I'm so overwhelmed. And to your point, they said, what I'm focused on is I want to know where these candidates stand on foreign policy, on abortion rights, on the economy. That's what I'm listening for. And to Cornell's point, we're not hearing that very often because so much attention is on these indictments that these swing voters still can't even explain.
Does it just become background noise, Barbara?
Well, for Trump, it's all about him. And I think for voters, they want to know, when are you going to talk about me? And next week, when at the debate, when Trump's not even there to talk about voters, I think that's going to be a problem, and Trump's going to start losing, altitude, and I think that's going to be a problem for him. And I think there's going to be an opening here, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for a candidate who's going to take on Trump and be able to articulate a message for a Republican future and a Republican vision.
Cornell, very quickly, do you think that Trump's going to start to lose altitude?
Not if they don't hit him. Not if they don't attack him. By the way, if I were Trump, I would not.
Christie is Barbara's point. Is that Christie?
But it's got to be more. It's got to be more.
Okay.
It's got to be more than Christie. It's got to be the ones within striking distance of him, taking him on to get ahead of him. If I were Trump, I would not show up at the debate because he has very little upside at that debate.
My sources are signaling that it's very unlikely. Great conversation. This was fantastic. Eugene Scott, Cornell Belcher, and Barbara Comstock. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.